Kyle Morrison walked through the long hallways of the royal palace, checking each door as he passed. The palace was quiet tonight. Too quiet. Something felt wrong, but he could not say what it was. He had been a security guard here for 6 months now, and he knew the normal sounds of the place. The soft hum of machines, the distant voices of servants, the gentle footsteps of the royal guards on patrol. Tonight, all of that seemed muted, as if someone had turned down the volume on the entire building. He touched the radio on his belt and pressed the button. Station 4 checking in. All clear. Static crackled back at him. He frowned and tried again. Station 4 to command. Do you copy? More static. Kyle stopped walking and looked around. The lights flickered above him, and for a moment the entire corridor went dark. Then they came back on, but dimmer than before. His hand moved to the gun at his hip. He had been a soldier before this job, and his instincts were telling him that something bad was about to happen. The Valorans who owned this palace were strange people. They looked human enough with 2 arms and 2 legs and a head, but their skin was silver and smooth like metal. They could talk inside your head without moving their lips. Kyle did not like it when they did that. It felt like someone was poking around in his brain. But they paid well, and the job was supposed to be easy. Guard the palace. Make sure nothing bad happened to Queen Valara. Go home with a good paycheck. Now Kyle was not so sure the job would be easy anymore. He turned a corner and nearly ran into Commander Thrix. The commander was the head of all the guards in the palace. He was 7 feet tall with silver skin that glowed when he was upset. Right now he was glowing very bright. Kyle had never seen him look scared before, but tonight the commander's eyes were wide and his hands were shaking. Commander, what is going on? Kyle asked. Thrix grabbed Kyle's shoulder. His telepathic voice pushed into Kyle's mind, urgent and afraid. You need to leave now. Get out of the palace while you still can. Kyle pulled back. What are you talking about? What is happening? The Inner Council has betrayed us. General Kelvar is leading them. They are coming for the Queen. The commander's mental voice was breaking up, like a bad phone connection. They used the network. All of us feel it. The fear, we cannot stay. We have to run. Kyle did not understand. The network? What network? Before Thrix could explain, alarms started screaming through the palace. Red lights flashed on the walls. Kyle looked out the nearest window and saw ships falling from the sky. They were military ships with guns pointed at the palace. His training kicked in and he started to run toward the throne room. Behind him, Commander Thrix vanished. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. Kyle skidded to a stop and looked back. The commander had used his teleportation power to leave. Kyle spun around and kept running, but everywhere he looked, guards were disappearing. Some teleported away, some ran for the exits, some just stood there frozen with fear, before their legs finally started moving and they fled. Kyle reached the main hall and stopped. 300 guards had been on duty tonight. Now the hall was empty. The only sound was his own breathing and the wailing alarms. He could not believe what he was seeing. The entire royal guard had abandoned their posts. They had left the Queen alone. He ran faster, taking the stairs 2 at a time. The throne room was on the top floor of the palace. As he climbed, he saw servants running past him, going down while he went up. They looked at him like he was crazy. One of them, an old Velaran woman, grabbed his arm. You must leave, human. The fear is spreading. Everyone must go. Kyle pulled free and kept climbing. I have a job to do. The woman stared at him. You do not feel it? The compulsion? I do not know what you are talking about. Kyle left her behind and reached the top floor. The doors to the throne room were still closed. He hit the emergency lock button on the wall panel, and the massive doors started to seal themselves. Whatever was coming, it would have to break through those doors first. He pushed through the smaller side entrance and found Queen Valara standing in the center of the throne room. She was tall and elegant, with a crown made of glowing crystal on her head. She turned when she heard him enter, and for a moment she looked surprised. You are still here, she said out loud, not using telepathy. Why have you not fled? Kyle locked the side door behind him. Because I swore an oath to protect you, Your Majesty. Where I come from, we keep our promises. The Queen walked closer to him. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. Do you know what is happening? Not exactly. But I know those ships outside are not friendly. And I know everyone else ran away. Kyle checked his gun and made sure it was fully loaded. Can you tell me what this network thing is that Commander Thrix mentioned? Valara closed her eyes for a moment. Her crown pulsed with light. All Velerans are connected through telepathy. We share thoughts and feelings across our entire species. It makes us strong. It makes us united. But General Kelvar has found a way to use that connection as a weapon. He has sent fear through the network. Every Veleran feels it. An overwhelming need to run, to hide, to leave this place. Kyle understood now. And humans are not connected to this network. No, you are alone in your minds. The Queen looked at him with new eyes. I always thought that made your species weak. Now I see it may be your greatest strength. The building shook. Kyle grabbed a table to steady himself. Through the windows he could see soldiers dropping from the ships on cables. They were coming fast. He started moving furniture, creating barriers and cover. The Queen watched him work. You cannot hold them off alone. Maybe not. But I am going to try. Kyle pulled out his radio again. This time he switched to the emergency channel, the one that connected to coalition ships in nearby systems. This is security contractor Kyle Morrison at the Valoran Royal Palace. We are under attack. The Queen is in danger. Request immediate assistance. He did not know if anyone heard him. The static was loud and the signal was weak. But he had done what he could. Now he had to hold this room until help arrived or until he could not hold it anymore. The main door shuddered. Something hit them from outside. Hard. Kyle took position behind one of the marble pillars and aimed his gun at the entrance. Stay behind me, Your Majesty. Valara moved to the back of the throne room. Her hands began to glow with blue energy. She had powers he had never seen her use before. I will help as I can. The doors shook again. The metal was starting to bend. Kyle's finger rested on the trigger of his gun. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He had been in bad situations before. Earth's unification wars had taught him how to stay calm when everything was falling apart. He took a deep breath and waited. A voice boomed through the palace speaker system. It was deep and commanding. Surrender the Queen, human. You are only one man. You cannot stop us. Leave now and you may live. Kyle did not answer. He just kept his gun pointed at the doors. The voice spoke again. This is General Kelvar. I am giving you one chance. Walk away. Kyle looked back at Queen Valara. She met his eyes, and in that moment they understood each other. She needed someone who would not run, someone who could not be controlled by telepathic fear, someone who would keep their word no matter what. He turned back to the doors and shouted, I am not going anywhere. The doors exploded inward. The blast threw Kyle backwards. He hit the floor hard and rolled, coming up with his gun still in his hand. Smoke filled the throne room. Through the haze he could see shapes moving toward him. Soldiers in black armor, carrying weapons that glowed with blue energy. They were not hurrying. They thought this would be easy. Kyle aimed and fired. His first shot hit the lead soldier in the chest. The armor took most of the impact, but the man stumbled. Kyle fired again, this time at the legs where the armor was thinner. The soldier went down. The others stopped advancing and took cover. Get down, Kyle shouted to the Queen. Valara dropped behind her throne just as energy bolts streaked across the room. They hit the wall behind her, leaving black scorch marks. Kyle ducked behind his pillar and counted the attackers. 8 soldiers in the room, maybe more outside. His gun had 20 shots left. He would have to make each one count. He leaned out and fired 3 quick shots. 2 missed. 1 hit a soldier in the arm. The man cried out and fell back. The others returned fire, forcing Kyle to duck again. Pieces of marble exploded from the pillar above his head. This was not sustainable. They had more people and more firepower. Kyle needed to change the situation. He looked around the throne room, searching for anything he could use. His eyes landed on the chandelier hanging from the ceiling. It was massive, made of crystal and metal, held up by a thick chain. Your Majesty, Kyle called out, can you use your powers on that chandelier? Valara looked up at it. Her hands were still glowing. I can try on my signal. Kyle waited until the soldiers advanced again, moving closer to his position. Now, the Queen threw her hands up. Blue energy shot from her fingers and wrapped around the chain. The metal glowed white-hot and snapped. The chandelier fell like a meteor, crashing down on 3 soldiers. They did not get up. The remaining soldiers scattered. Kyle used the confusion to move to a better position. He grabbed a heavy table and flipped it on its side, creating a new barrier. Then he reached out and pulled the Queen toward him. She stumbled but made it to safety. Are you hurt? He asked. No, but I cannot do that again. Not for a while. Using our powers takes energy. I need time to recover, Kyle nodded. Stay here. Stay low. The soldiers were regrouping. Kyle could hear them shouting to each other. They were angry now. One of them called out in a language Kyle did not understand, but he got the meaning. They were going to rush him all at once. He checked his ammunition. 15 shots, 5 soldiers left. If they all came at him together, he would not get them all. He needed another plan. His eyes went to the windows. They were made of thick glass, probably reinforced. But they were also the weak point in the room's defenses. Kyle grabbed a piece of broken marble from the chandelier crash. He threw it at the nearest window as hard as he could. The glass cracked but did not break. He fired his gun at the same spot. The window shattered. Cold wind rushed into the throne room. Outside, the storm had arrived. Rain poured down and lightning lit up the sky. Kyle ran to the broken window and looked out. The palace was built on a cliff. Below him was a drop of hundreds of feet. This was not an escape route. But it gave him an idea. The soldiers charged. All 5 at once, just as he expected. Kyle stepped away from the window and fired. He did not aim for the soldiers. He aimed for the floor in front of them. The marble was polished and slick. His shots created holes and cracks. One soldier slipped and fell. Another tried to jump over him and stumbled. Kyle kept shooting, not to kill, but to keep them off balance, to make them dodge and duck and stumble. They were good fighters, but they had expected an easy job. They had not expected to fight someone who actually knew what he was doing. One soldier made it close, too close. Kyle dropped his gun and grabbed the man's rifle, pulling him off balance. They grappled, wrestling for control. The soldier was strong, but Kyle had trained in close combat on Mars, where the low gravity made every move count. He used the soldier's momentum against him, spinning and throwing him toward the broken window. The soldier crashed through what was left of the glass and disappeared into the storm. His scream cut off quickly. The other soldiers froze. They looked at each other, then at Kyle. He stood there, breathing hard, waiting to see what they would do. One of them started to raise his weapon. Before he could fire, a voice came through their radios. Fall back. All units fall back to regroup. The soldiers retreated, moving quickly through the broken doorway. Kyle did not chase them. He grabbed his gun from the floor and checked it. 5 shots left. He looked at the Queen. That was the first wave. There will be more. Valara stood up slowly. She looked around at the destroyed throne room. Her beautiful palace was in ruins. I never thought I would see this day. 3,000 years of peace ended in one night. We are not done yet. Kyle started gathering anything useful from the fallen soldiers. Extra energy packs for weapons, communication devices, a medical kit. He worked quickly, knowing they did not have much time. The Queen watched him. Why are you doing this? You could have left with the others. You could have escaped. Kyle looked up at her. I already told you. I made a promise, but surely you know you cannot win.
Even if you hold them off tonight, what about tomorrow?
What about next week? I sent out a distress call. Help is coming, and if it does not, Kyle strapped one of the soldiers' rifles to his back. Then I hold them as long as I can. That is my job. Valara shook her head slowly. I have never understood humans. Your minds are closed to us. We cannot feel what you feel or know what you think, but you choose to stand beside us anyway. Maybe that is the point. Kyle sealed the doorway again with debris and broken furniture. We choose. Every single one of us makes a choice. Your people had their choice taken away by that telepathic weapon. But I still have mine. The building shook again. More ships were landing. Kyle could see them through the windows. Dozens of them. General Kelvar was bringing his full force. He moved to a new position and checked his weapons. The rifle he had taken had a full charge. His pistol had 5 shots. He also had 3 grenades from the soldiers. It would have to be enough. Valara sat down on the steps leading to her throne. She looked tired. The attack and the telepathic fear from the network had drained her. How long do you think we have? Until they regroup and send in more soldiers. Kyle glanced at his watch. Maybe 20 minutes. 20 minutes. The Queen closed her eyes. Tell me about Earth. I have never been there. Kyle looked over at her. Why do you want to know? Because if we die tonight, I want to understand the world that made someone like you. Someone who stays when everyone else runs. Kyle thought about home. About the blue oceans and green forests. About the cities that reached to the sky. About the deserts where he had trained. Earth was beautiful. But it was also hard. We spent thousands of years fighting each other. Wars over land, over resources, over ideas. We almost destroyed ourselves more than once. How did you survive? We learned to stand together when it mattered. We learned that sometimes you have to fight for what you believe in, and we learned that keeping your word is more important than staying safe. The Queen opened her eyes and looked at him. Your species is very strange, Kyle smiled. I get that a lot. Outside lights appeared in the darkness. The soldiers were coming back. Kyle took a deep breath and gripped his rifle. Here we go again. The second wave came faster than Kyle expected. This time, they did not try to break down the doors. Instead, they came through the walls. Explosions ripped through the stone on 3 sides of the throne room. Kyle grabbed the Queen and threw, both of them behind the throne just before debris rained down on where they had been standing. Soldiers poured through the holes in the walls. Kyle counted at least 15 of them, maybe 20. Too many. He fired his rifle at the closest group, forcing them to take cover, but they kept coming, spreading out through the room. Stay low, he shouted to Valara. The Queen did not answer. She was focusing her powers again, even though she was exhausted. A shield of blue energy formed in front of them, blocking the incoming fire. Energy bolts hit the shield and scattered, but each impact made the shield flicker. It would not last long. Kyle pulled one of the grenades from his belt. He set the timer for 3 seconds and threw it toward the largest group of soldiers. The explosion was loud in the enclosed space. Soldiers flew backwards, their armor torn and smoking. The ones who could still move retreated to find cover, but more kept coming. They were professionals now, working as a team. They moved in pairs, one firing while the other advanced. Kyle switched positions constantly, never staying in one place for more than a few seconds. He fired short bursts from his rifle, trying to conserve ammunition. The Queen's shield collapsed. She fell to her knees, gasping. I cannot maintain it. I am sorry. You did great. Kyle moved in front of her, putting himself between her and the soldiers. Just stay down. A soldier appeared on top of the rubble pile to Kyle's left. He aimed his weapon down at them. Kyle was faster. He swung his rifle up and fired. The soldier dropped, but the move left Kyle exposed. 3 other soldiers opened fire on his position. He felt something hot slice across his shoulder. Pain flared, but he kept moving. You are hurt, Valara said. Just a graze. Kyle used his second grenade. It bought them another few seconds as the soldiers scattered again. His rifle clicked empty. He dropped it and drew his pistol. 5 shots. He had to make them count. The soldiers were getting bolder now. They knew he was running low on ammunition. One of them stood up from cover and started to advance. Kyle shot him in the leg. Another one tried the same thing from a different angle. Kyle shot him too. 3 shots left. We need to move, Kyle said. We cannot stay here. Where can we go? The Queen looked around at the ruined throne room. They have us surrounded. Kyle spotted a small door behind the throne. A service entrance, probably for servants. He had never paid much attention to it before, but now it might be their only chance. That door. Where does it lead? To the royal chambers. Valara understood what he was thinking. We can barricade ourselves there. The rooms are smaller, easier to defend. Kyle used his last grenade. The explosion created a cloud of smoke and dust. Go. Now. They ran for the door. Kyle fired his last 3 shots to keep the soldiers back, then threw the empty pistol at the nearest one. It hit him in the face, and he went down. Kyle reached the door and pulled it open. Valara went through first. He followed and slammed it shut behind them. The hallway beyond was narrow and dark. Kyle found the lock mechanism and engaged it. The door was thick metal, designed to seal the royal chambers in case of fire or attack. It would buy them time, but not much. This way, Valara said. She led him down the hallway, past paintings and statues, through rooms filled with books and treasures. Finally, they reached her private chamber. It was smaller than the throne room, with only 2 entrances. Kyle immediately started barricading both doors with furniture. The Queen sat on her bed, exhausted. Her hands were shaking and her skin had lost some of its glow. Using so much power had drained her badly. We cannot keep doing this. Eventually they will break through. I know. Kyle checked his shoulder. The wound was not deep, but it was bleeding. He found a cloth and pressed it against the injury. But we keep fighting anyway. Why? Valara stood and walked to him. She looked into his eyes, searching for an answer. You have no weapons left. You are injured. Help may never come. Why do you not surrender? Kyle tied the cloth around his shoulder. Because surrender means you die, and I promised to protect you. But you will die too. The Queen's voice was quiet. You must know that. Maybe. Kyle walked to the window and looked out. Dawn was coming. The sky was getting lighter. He could see the ships still circling outside, or maybe help will arrive in time. Either way, I am not giving up. Valara was silent for a moment, then she spoke again. On my world we have a word. Karesh. It means one who stands alone. We use it to describe people who are separated from the telepathic network, either by choice or by damage. It is considered a sad thing, a lonely thing. Kyle turned to look at her. And I am beginning to think we were wrong. The Queen walked to stand beside him at the window. Your people are all Karesh. Every single human stands alone in their own mind. Yet you are not weak. You are not sad. You choose your connections instead of inheriting them. You choose your loyalties. That choice makes them stronger. Kyle smiled despite the situation. Took you long enough to figure that out. The sound of breaking metal echoed through the chamber. They were cutting through the door. Kyle looked around for weapons. He found a ceremonial sword hanging on the wall. It was ornate and probably not meant for actual fighting, but it was better than nothing. He took it down and tested its weight. Can you use your powers at all? He asked the Queen. Valara held up her hands. A small flicker of blue energy appeared and then died. Very little. I need more time to recover. Then I will buy you that time. Kyle positioned himself in front of the door. The sword felt awkward in his hands, but he gripped it firmly. The door burst open. Soldiers rushed in. Kyle swung the sword, catching the first one across the chest. The blade was sharper than he expected. The soldier fell. Kyle used the momentum to spin and strike at the second soldier. This one blocked with his rifle, but Kyle kicked his legs out from under him. More soldiers poured through the door. Kyle could not stop them all. One of them grabbed him from behind. He drove his elbow back into the soldier's stomach and broke free, but another one hit him with the butt of a rifle. Kyle went down. The soldiers surrounded the Queen. She stood there, weak and defenseless. One of them raised his weapon, and then something strange happened. The soldier froze. All of them froze. Their weapons lowered and they stood perfectly still, as if someone had pressed a pause button on reality. A new voice spoke, deep and commanding. Stand down. All units, stand down immediately. Kyle looked up from the floor, confused and bleeding. Through the doorway, he could see new soldiers entering. But these ones wore different uniforms. Coalition uniforms. Help had arrived. Commander Ryan Blake strode into the royal chamber like he owned the place. He was a big man, even by human standards, with gray hair and a face that had seen too many battles. Behind him came a squad of coalition Marines, their weapons ready. They quickly secured the room and disarmed General Kelvar's soldiers. Blake knelt beside Kyle and helped him sit up. You look like hell, Morrison. Kyle managed a weak smile. You should see the other guys, Blake laughed. I did. You held off an entire battalion with nothing but a pistol and a prayer. Command is going to have a field day with this. He looked over at Queen Valara. Your Majesty, are you injured? Valara shook her head. No, thanks to this human. She looked at Kyle with something like wonder in her eyes. He stood when everyone else ran. Blake nodded. We picked up his distress signal 6 hours ago. Jumped here as fast as we could. He helped Kyle to his feet. Medical team is on the way. Let us get you looked at. What about General Kelvar? Kyle asked in custody. Blake's face went hard. We caught him trying to escape on a shuttle. He will face trial for treason and attempted murder of the Queen. The next few hours were a blur for Kyle. Medics treated his wounds. Officers took his statement. Scientists examined the throne room and studied the telepathic weapon Kelvar had used. Through it all, Kyle sat in a chair and watched the palace slowly come back to life. The Valorans started returning. First in small groups, then in waves. They came back ashamed and confused. The telepathic fear had faded, but the memory of running away remained. They had abandoned their queen in her moment of need. The guilt on their faces was clear. Commander Thrix was among the first to return. He found Kyle and knelt before him. "I am sorry, human. I ran when I should have stayed. There is no excuse for my cowardice." Kyle shook his head. "It was not cowardice. Kelvar used a weapon against you. He took away your choice, but you did not run." Thrix looked up at him. "You are not connected to our network. You could not feel the fear, yet you stayed anyway. I made a promise." Kyle said it simply. "Where I come from, that means something." The commander stood. "From this day forward, you have the gratitude of every Velaran. You saved our queen and showed us that true loyalty is not something that can be controlled or manipulated. It must be chosen." 3 days later, a formal gathering was held in what remained of the throne room. Engineers were already working to repair the damage, but for now the room stood as a testament to the battle that had taken place. Scorch marks on the walls, broken marble on the floor, shattered windows letting in the wind. Queen Valara stood at the center of the room, her crown glowing bright again. Around her were assembled hundreds of Valorans and coalition officials. Kyle stood off to the side, wearing a clean uniform but still bearing bandages from his wounds. The queen began to speak, using her voice instead of telepathy, so all species present could understand. "We have suffered a great betrayal. General Kelvar found a way to use our greatest gift as a weapon. He turned our telepathic network into a tool of fear and control. Every Velaran felt that fear. Every Velaran ran." She paused and looked around the room. "Except one. One being in this palace chose to stay. Not because he was immune to fear. Humans feel fear just as we do. But because he had made a promise and he kept it." Valara gestured for Kyle to come forward. He did so reluctantly, uncomfortable with the attention. The queen placed her hand on his shoulder. Kyle Morrison held this throne room for 8 hours against overwhelming odds. He had no reinforcements, no telepathic powers, limited weapons and ammunition. All he had was his determination and his word. She removed her crown and held it up for everyone to see. For 3,000 years, this crown has been worn by rulers of the Valoran Empire. It has witnessed peace and prosperity, but it has never witnessed courage like what I saw that night. The queen placed the crown at Kyle's feet, the highest honor a Valoran could bestow. "We thought ourselves superior because we share thoughts. We thought other species were lesser because they stand alone in their minds. But we were wrong. Standing alone is not weakness. It is strength. Because when you stand alone, you must choose your connections. You must choose your loyalties. And choices made freely are stronger than any telepathic bond." Commander Blake stepped forward. "On behalf of the Galactic Coalition, I hereby award security contractor Kyle Morrison the Medal of Valor, the highest honor we can bestow. His actions saved not just Queen Valara but the stability of the entire sector." The room erupted in applause. Velarans and humans alike cheered. Kyle stood there, overwhelmed. He had just been doing his job. He had not expected any of this. Later, after the ceremony, Kyle found himself alone with the queen on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The repairs were ongoing, but life was slowly returning to normal. "What will you do now?" Valara asked. "Will you return to Earth?" Kyle shook his head. "Actually, Commander Blake offered me a position. Training new security forces. Mixed teams of telepaths and non-telepaths. So you will stay?" "For a while." Kyle looked out at the gardens. "You need people who can teach your guards how to work with beings outside the network. And honestly, I think I can do some good here." Valara smiled. "I am glad. We have much to learn from humans. About choice. About standing alone. About keeping promises even when it seems impossible." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Kyle spoke again. "Can I ask you something? Of course, that word you mentioned. Koresh. The one who stands alone. You said it was considered sad, yes." Valara's voice was soft. "Or rather, we thought it was sad. But I understand now that we were wrong. Standing alone is not lonely if you choose your connections. If you choose who to trust and who to protect." Kyle nodded. "Good. Because from now on, every human in the coalition is going to be called Koresh by someone. And I would rather they saw it as a badge of honor than a mark of sadness." The queen laughed. It was the first time Kyle had heard her laugh, and it was a beautiful sound. "It will be an honor. From this day forward, Koresh means not lonely, but free. Free to choose, and there is no greater strength than that. 6 months passed. The palace was fully repaired, more beautiful than before. But something else had changed too, something deeper. The way Velerans saw themselves and their place in the galaxy had shifted. Kyle stood in the training yard watching 24 new recruits run through exercises. Half were Valorans, half were other species from across the coalition. Humans, yes, but also Krell with their 4 arms, and Nexians with their crystalline skin, and even a few Borath whose bodies were made of living metal. The idea was simple: create security teams that could not be controlled by telepathic weapons. Teams where members had to learn to trust through actions, not shared thoughts. It had been difficult at first. The Velerans felt blind without their telepathy. The non-telepathic species felt excluded when the Valorans unconsciously communicated with each other. But slowly, they were learning. Learning to speak out loud. Learning to read body language. Learning that trust built through hard work and shared danger was stronger than any telepathic bond. Commander Thrix approached Kyle. The Valoran had requested to join the training program, saying he needed to learn the lessons Kyle had taught. Your methods are unconventional. But they work, Kyle shrugged. On Earth, we never had telepathy. We had to figure out other ways to work together. Trust, communication, keeping our word. Simple stuff, really. Simple, Thrix repeated, yes, but also profound. We Velerans thought our telepathy made us advanced, but it made us vulnerable. We never learned to stand on our own. A young Veleran recruit approached them. His name was Lorik, and he had been one of the palace guards who fled that night. He carried the shame of it visibly. Instructor Morrison, I have a question. Go ahead. Kyle turned to face him. How did you resist the fear? When everyone else was running, how did you stay calm? Kyle thought about it.
I was not calm.
I was terrified. But fear is not the problem. Fear is natural. The problem is letting fear make your choices for you. But we could not resist it. The telepathic fear was too strong. Lorik looked down. We are weak. No, Kyle's voice was firm. Kelvar used a weapon against you. That does not make you weak. What makes you strong is being here now, learning to prevent it from happening again. The young Veleran looked up. You really believe that I do? Kyle gestured to the training yard. Look around. 6 months ago, this did not exist. Now you have mixed teams working together. You are learning, growing. That takes courage. Lorik nodded slowly and returned to his squad. Thrix watched him go. You are good at this. Teaching, I mean, Kyle smiled. My old drill sergeant would be proud. Or maybe surprised. I was not the best student. That evening, Kyle was called to the throne room. Queen Valara was there, along with Commander Blake and several coalition officials. A large screen on the wall showed a map of the galaxy. Kyle, Blake said, we have been watching your progress. The mixed security teams are exceeding all expectations. Thank you, sir. But I just teach them what I know. They do the hard work, Blake smiled, always modest. That is why we want to expand the program. Other worlds have heard about what happened here. They want to learn. The Coalition is offering you a position as Chief Training Officer for Mixed Species Security. Kyle blinked. That sounds like a big job, it is. Blake pointed to the map. You would travel to different worlds, set up training programs, teach others what you have taught here. The goal is to make sure no species can be controlled through their biology again. Valara spoke up. This is important work, Kyle. What you started here is changing how we think about security across the entire coalition. Other telepathic species are vulnerable to the same weapon Kelvar used. They need to learn what you taught us. Kyle looked at the map, seeing dozens of worlds marked. It would mean leaving Valora Prime, leaving the palace he had defended, but it would also mean spreading the lessons learned to places that needed them. I accept good. Blake extended his hand. You ship out in 2 weeks. Use that time to finish training your replacement here. 2 weeks later, Kyle stood in the palace courtyard, his bags packed. The new recruits had gathered to see him off. So had many of the palace staff and guards. Commander Thrix stepped forward and saluted. We will not forget what you taught us, Instructor Morrison. Standing alone is not weakness. It is the foundation of true strength. Kyle returned the salute. Just remember to choose your loyalties, and once you make a promise, keep it. No matter what, Queen Valara approached. She carried something wrapped in cloth. This is for you. She unwrapped it to reveal a sword, not a ceremonial one like the one Kyle had used during the battle. This one was clearly meant for combat, perfectly balanced and razor-sharp. It is made of Velaran crystal steel. The Queen held it out to him. The strongest material we can forge. But more than that, it carries a message. On the blade, look closely. Kyle took the sword and examined it. Etched into the blade was a single word in the Valoran language. Koresh Valara smiled. The one who stands alone. Once we thought it meant lonely. Now we know it means free. You gave us that understanding, Kyle Morrison. You showed us that the strongest bonds are chosen, not inherited. Kyle strapped the sword to his belt. I will carry it with honor, Your Majesty. I know you will. The Queen placed her hand on his shoulder one last time. Go now. Teach others what you taught us, and know that you will always have a home here on Valora Prime. Kyle boarded the shuttle. As it lifted off and the palace grew smaller below him, he thought about that night 6 months ago. When the alarms had sounded, when everyone had fled, when he had made the choice to stay, he had been just one man with a gun and a promise. It should not have been enough. By all logic, he should have failed. But he had not failed because he had something the attackers did not understand. He had the human ability to choose, to stand firm, to keep his word even when every rational thought said to run. And now, because of that choice, the galaxy was changing. Other worlds were learning. Other species were preparing. The lessons of that night were spreading outward like ripples in water. Years passed. Kyle traveled to dozens of worlds. He trained thousands of soldiers and guards. He taught them all the same lessons. How to work with beings different from themselves. How to build trust through actions. How to stand firm when fear tells you to run. And everywhere he went, people knew his story. The human who held a throne room for 8 hours. The man who refused to run when the palace went silent. The one who proved that sometimes standing alone is the strongest thing you can do. Eventually, Kyle grew old. His hair turned gray, then white. His hands, which had once held weapons so steady, began to shake. But his mind remained sharp and his lessons remained true. On his final trip to Valora Prime, now as an old man, Kyle returned to the throne room. It had been completely rebuilt, more magnificent than ever. But in the center stood a statue, a monument to that night. It showed a human in combat gear, gun raised, standing before a throne. At the base was an inscription in every language of the coalition. When the palace went silent, only the human remained to guard the Queen. His name was Kyle Morrison, and he kept his promise. Queen Valara, now elderly herself but still regal, stood beside him. Do you ever regret it? Staying that night? Kyle shook his head. No, it was the right choice. The only choice because of your promise. She asked because of my promise. Kyle looked at the statue. And because sometimes one person in one moment can change everything, not by being special or powerful, but by simply choosing to stand when everyone else runs. Valara nodded. You taught us that, Kyle Morrison. You taught us all that. They stood there together, human and Velaran, looking at the monument. Outside, the palace grounds were filled with soldiers training. Mixed teams of telepaths and non-telepaths working together, learning together, growing together. The galaxy had changed. Not overnight, not easily, but it had changed. And it started with one human who made a promise and kept it, even when the palace went silent and everyone else was gone. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. Choice matters. Loyalty matters. Keeping your word matters. These simple human truths, so basic and so profound, had reshaped an empire and influenced 1,000 worlds. Kyle smiled as he looked at the statue. Not bad for a security guard who just wanted to do his job. Not bad at all. The end.